Good morning. Good morning. Today I want to talk about verse 4 in the first chapter of the Sefer Yetzirah. So let's see if I can share my screen. Okay, and here we go. Now, as usual, I'll look at first the translation of this verse by the late Rabbi R.A. Kaplan, and then we'll look at my translation. And let's see. So, Rabbi Kaplan's translation from the Hebrew up here is 10 sefirot of nothingness, 10 and not 9, 10 and not 11. Understand with wisdom, be wise with understanding. Examine with them and probe from them. Make each thing stand on its essence and make the Creator sit on his base. Okay, and I translate that as 10 declarations of constraint, 10 and not 9, 10 and not 11. Understand with wisdom and be wise with understanding. Examine with them, explore with them, and stand each word and thing on its wellspring, and return the assembler to its base. Okay, let's look at this in a little bit more detail. A few things are going on in this passage. First, we're reminded that the number of sefirot is 10 and not 9, or 11, just 10. And that's important because if there are only 10 sefirot, or utterances, then that corresponds to 10 commandments, 10 generations from Adam to Noah, 10 generations from Noah to Abraham, 10 fingers, and various other things that come in 10 that are meaningful to us. And remember that at the beginning of Torah, God creates the world with 10 utterances and not 9. Okay, and it says this is a reminder that there are really 10 times that the phrase God said in Hebrew is written in Genesis if we interpret the first verse as a creative utterance. Now recall, we've said this in commentary on some other verses, that if we look at that first chapter of Genesis, and you have to look at the specific Hebrew, the phrase "and God said" or Elohim said, it actually occurs just 9 times. But based upon what is written in one of the Psalms, we conclude that the very first verse in the beginning is also a creative utterance. So the final conclusion is that God created the world with 10 utterances, not 9. Okay, furthermore, if God made an additional 11th utterance somewhere, then that would suggest that the Torah is incomplete. And that is a conclusion we are not going to accept. Okay, next we read in the text that we need to understand with wisdom and be wise with understanding. Now, as Kabbalah evolved, these words, wisdom and understanding, became synonymous respectively with the functions of the right brain, or with the functions of the right and left hemispheres of the brain. And the result in Kabbalah of the coordination of these two brain functions is knowledge. Thus, use all the parts of your brain to explore and examine every facet of this reality. That's how you learn. Okay. Now, in the Bible, we often encounter the image of God riding on a cloud or being carried by cherubs, cheruvim in Hebrew. But in many of these images, it also becomes clear that God is not really moving. Instead, he is being carried around or is seated on a throne that is carried around. Consequently, God can in this way present an image of activity while at the same time also conforming to the dictum found in Malachi 3:6 that God is always unchanging. Okay, God appears to be moving, but in each case he's just sitting and something else is moving. In a similar manner, our consciousness appears to dart back and forth from one thing to another, but the text suggests that this movement of our consciousness is likewise illusory. Our awareness, instead of moving around, is always fixed and stationary. In reality, every perception points us back towards the silent observer. Okay, so we often think of our consciousness moving around, focusing on this, focusing on that, but actually it just stays where it is. In fact, everything is just consciousness. It's like in a dream. You know, we think the objects are different from us, but everything there is made out of our own consciousness. And so the consciousness is never moving. All right. So what this passage wants us to do is become aware of that observer and make that the center of our universe. When we learn how to let every perception lead us back to the center, then we will understand what is meant by the phrase, stand each word and thing on its wellspring. Okay. So, basically, you want each perception, everything out there, to lead you back to the very source of your awareness. That's the wellspring of everything. And when you do that, you have stood that word or that thing on its source, on its wellspring. Now, it is very important, as early as this fourth verse, the text essentially gives us a meditation technique. This suggests that this is a skill that must be mastered before any of the other techniques mentioned in this work can be successfully implemented. Further instructions on meditation are given in verse 1:8, chapter 1, verse 8. And we'll get there eventually. Okay. By the way, going back to this, we could say that the basic meditation technique is you just let every perception guide you back to the source of consciousness, that place where it's known. So if you're seeing something, don't focus on what you're seeing. Focus on that place within you where it is understood. And lastly, we could say that additionally, the word that I have rendered as assembler is more commonly translated as creator. However, the Hebrew word used in this context is based upon the verb yatzar, to form, and this refers generally to something from something creation. Consequently, I find it more accurate to refer to this as the assembler within us that constructs the reality that we view. And when we establish this observer, this assembler, in its proper place at the center of our awareness, then we will no longer be so caught up in the pursuit of things that lack real substance. We have successfully returned the assembler to its base. All right, and in cognitive psychology today, it's well understood that the world we see is not really the world as it is. What we see is more like the user-friendly desktop on our computer, right? We can't really deal directly with what's going on inside the nuts and bolts of our computer. We need something a little bit more user-friendly where we can just point and click and get things done. That is like the reality that our brain puts together for us. Our brain takes all these perceptions and assembles sort of a user-friendly version of reality for us. Okay? And within that reality that is assembled for us, well, sometimes we feel like our awareness is centered, and sometimes we feel like it isn't. The actual reality is awareness always is. It never goes anywhere. But in terms of these feelings of being centered or not centered, the first thing you want to do is establish what feels to you like a centered form of awareness where you're not overly focused or attached on this or that. You want to feel centered and balanced, and that is what is referred to as returning the assembler to its base. And once you've done that, then every perception that comes along, rather than letting it pull you away from that center, you want to let that perception guide you back to the center. And you do that by focusing on that place, that awareness that each perception disappears into. Okay, so if I'm looking at some object in my room, like a chair, rather than getting so focused on I'm seeing a chair, focus instead on what is it that's perceiving the chair? It's my awareness. And that way, every object takes you back to that centered awareness. And when you've done that, you've returned the assembler to its base and each object to its wellspring. And that's all you have to do. Okay, that's a very effective but very ancient meditation technique found in the Sefer Yetzirah. All right, well, that's it for this presentation. So let me stop my share. And I look forward to seeing you in for verse 5 of chapter 1 of the Sefer Yetzirah. Shalom.